Hello? Hey, it's Johnny. Listen, I can't have anyone. Don't call the police. Please. Just. That was the last time anyone heard from Johnny Gosch. You're listening to Still Unanswered. I'm Mara Ellison. This show is about the questions that won't let us go. Today, Johnny Gosch. He was a friend, a neighbor, someone who painted murals on side streets and knew your order at the corner cafe. He disappeared in a way that left a handful of facts, a lot of memories, and a silence that filled an entire block. This episode is not a true crime spectacle. It's a human story about uncertainty, about how people hold on to fragments when the whole picture is gone. The questions we keep returning to are simple and terrible. What happened to Johnny? Why do people remember the same nights so differently? And what do we do when the answer might never come? Let's start with a moment I can't forget. Picture a late spring night, wet pavement, sodium streetlights buzzing. A phone, one that you aren't expecting to hear, starts to ring at 1:12 a.m. You fumble for it. Your thumb slides. The caller ID says Johnny. You think, he must be on his way over. You answer.
I remember exactly where I was. On my couch, shirt half on, one sock missing. The TV was on mute. It was late.
You picked up.
Yeah, I picked up. He sounded like something had been pulled out of his chest, like the air around him had been rearranged. "Don't call the police," he said. "Please, Eli, don't call the police." Then the line. It just died.
That line, "Don't call the police," is where the story stops for some people and starts for others. For Eli, it's a wound he carries every day. For me, as someone who tries to hold these moments steady on tape, that line is an entry point into all the things we do and don't know. Over the next hour, we'll move through the life that led to that call and the years that followed. But first, who was Johnny? He grew up in a small city not far from here. He was messy and bright, the kind of kid who drew maps of imaginary cities on the backs of grocery lists. He learned to fix a bike at 12, learned to charm a crowd at 18, learned to disappear by 32.
Johnny had this jacket. Leather, cracked on the elbows, a cigarette burn on the left pocket from some stupid accident. He wore it like it was a second skin. People remember jackets, right? I do.
Tell me about Johnny, Eli. The Johnny you knew when you were young.
He was loud when he wanted to be. He was funny. He could make you laugh in a room full of strangers. But he was also private in ways none of us respected. We'd be at a party and he'd sit against the wall and sketch people, little charcoal faces. He had this habit of saving napkins with ideas. He'd tape them to his bedroom wall like flags. He loved hummingbirds for some reason. God, that sounds dumb to say out loud. But he would stop anyone in the street to look at them through his hands, like a little theater. He called them tiny rebels.
Tiny rebels. I like that. It feels like a doorway. What else? Small domestic things. Rooms, objects, textures. Paint the scene of where he lived before things changed.
He lived above a print shop on 3rd, over the bakery that closed at 6. The stairs creaked like they were in on a joke. The apartment smelled like old paint and coffee, with a faint trace of someone else's cologne that never fazed him. There was a stack of sketchbooks by the radiator. The edges were soft from being thumbed. A chipped ashtray on the windowsill. And a plant he somehow kept alive, a spider plant that sprawled like it was auditioning for a jungle role.
You said sometimes he'd be against the wall at a party, sketching. Did anyone ever ask him why he did that?
We'd ask. He'd say, "I'm stealing people's shadows." He'd grin like he meant nothing by it, but sometimes he'd look up from a sketch and his face would be different, quieter, like something had just shifted in him. He'd make a joke and it would land wrong. I didn't think much of it then. None of us did.
When you look back now, are there moments you see as signs, or were they invisible at the time?
I keep trying to decide if I missed a signal or if Johnny was just complicated. There's one night I come back to small, stupid. We were at that bar on Polk, the one with the green booths. He left early. He walked out with his jacket zipped up like he was escaping the weather, and he didn't come back.
You believed then he was fine.
Yeah, he'd do this. He'd vanish for a couple days, come back with a new song in his head. But that pattern changed. In the spring before he disappeared, he started canceling big things. He quit a job he loved. He missed his sister's birthday. He got a bruise on his ribs that he said was from a bicycle fall, but...
You remember the bruise.
I do. It was purple, like someone had painted it on him. He didn't want to talk about it. That's the part that eats me sometimes. The little things that stacked up. A loan he took out that didn't make sense. A woman he argued with outside a show and then wouldn't tell us about. Small gaps.
Up until a turning point, Johnny's life was messy but familiar. People make these lists in the aftermath. Missed rent notices, a cracked window, an argument. For Johnny, the hinge came in late May. He quit a steady gig designing posters for a local theater. He sold parts of his equipment. He began taking night shifts at a printing press far outside town. Those choices didn't feel like the start of the end at the time, but they were different. Tell me the week that felt off.
It was like a weather change. In the space of 6 days, he stopped answering a lot of texts. He took a bus at 2 in the morning. He came back with his hands smelling like motor oil. He told me he was on the road to work out some stuff, like he was trying to outrun a thought. When someone spends that much time trying to outrun themselves, you start to get worried.
You described a specific day, the night he had a fight with someone at a gallery opening. 2 people saw it differently. One thought it was nothing, a disagreement about a piece. The other thought Johnny looked terrified. Which is true?
They both are. He could look like that, calm 1 minute, into another, like someone flicked a switch. I think what scared people most now is that nobody wanted to be the one to follow. Because if you followed, maybe you'd be the one asking the question that made it true.
Okay, the week that felt off leads us to one night. The night everything broke. We can reconstruct parts of it. I spoke to people. I followed timelines. Here's what we can say with certainty, and where the story slips. On a Thursday night, Johnny left a bar around 11:50 p.m. He sent a message at 12:03 a.m. to a friend that read, "I'm going to clear my head. Back soon." He called Eli at 1:12 a.m., that voicemail we played earlier. That was the last direct contact anyone has confirmed.
There were other noises. My phone buzzed. A mutual friend said her neighbor saw Johnny talking to someone under the streetlight by the laundromat at 12:45. Another person swore he saw Johnny's bike propped against a payphone. But those sightings overlap and contradict.
Let's go hour by hour. 11:50 p.m. Johnny leaves the bar. He walks east toward Elm. A barista at the corner cafe says Johnny ordered a coffee to go and then never picked it up. 12:03 a.m. He texts, "Gonna clear my head." 12:20 a.m. Surveillance footage from an ATM shows a figure matching Johnny's build walking past with a hood up. We can't be 100% on the footage because it's grainy and at an angle. 12:45 a.m. A neighbor reports seeing Johnny under a streetlight with a second man. 1:12 a.m. Eli receives the call. And then everything spreads out into less sure ground.
People start telling versions to fill the blank. Some say he got in a car with someone he shouldn't have. Some say he hitched a ride out of town. Some say that... Some people say he staged his disappearance to get away from his problems. That one hurts.
Let's be clear. None of those theories are verified. What we know as fact is this last confirmed voicemail and then a gap of hours that people remember differently. There's an argument among witnesses. One friend says Johnny left the bar calm, humming an old tune. Another says he left with his jaw tight, hands in fists. One said he was distracted. Another said he was terrified. That difference is crucial because it shapes how you picture the next events.
I remember standing on my porch at 2 a.m., waiting for his headlights. That's stupid, right? But I did. I thought he'd come back. When he didn't, I drove around until 5, just scanning every corner he used to go to.
You drove until 5?
I don't know how to stop moving when I'm scared. I kept thinking I'd see him on the sidewalk like it was normal. It wasn't.
After the night, people rallied. There were frantic phone calls, group texts, coffee shop flyers. Someone filed a missing person report. His sister, his landlord, different people at different times. Police took a statement, checked cameras, and at some point they closed it as a missing adult case without signs of foul play. But they didn't find Johnny. No body, no clear lead, no definitive crime scene. That absence is a place people keep returning to.
We had vigil nights. We'd gather near the laundromat, lights on our phones. People would talk in loops. Did anyone try to river? What about the shelter? Maybe he left town. We did everything half right, half wrong. We wanted answers in a way that made sense, and answers were never tidy.
In the weeks after, small things cropped up that complicated the story. A locker at a bus station was found with a sketchbook that could have been Johnny's, but the handwriting was smudged, and later some of his friends couldn't confirm it as his. A pawn shop said someone tried to sell a leather jacket matching his 2 months later, but the description was vague. There were leads that didn't hold. There were dead ends.
Guilt. There's a lot of it.
People's responses to not knowing took different forms. Eli, you carry guilt about the call and about not doing more that night. Tell me about that.
I replay the voicemail a lot. I try to catalog all the reasons I didn't leave the house. I tell myself practical reasons: work, the dog, the rent check. But then there are the stupid human reasons. Maybe he needs space. He hates a lot of fuss. Maybe he just needs to disappear for a day. That's what we told ourselves. And after, those same reasons felt like excuses.
Did you think of calling the police in the moment?
No, I thought if I called the police, I would make him real in a way that terrified me. Does that make sense? Like, if police got involved, we'd be admitting he couldn't handle this himself. I didn't want to be the person who believed he couldn't handle it. That's cowardly, I guess.
That's honest. I want to stress here, lots of people sat with the same decision and made different choices. There are no simple moral judgments that fit this kind of uncertainty. Over the months and years, several competing theories have taken shape. They are the narratives we tell ourselves to make a broken thing whole. They are also, often, reflections of our own fears. Theory 1. He left deliberately. Maybe Johnny decided to start over somewhere else. A new name, new city, new jacket. People who favor this theory point to his piles of uncashed rent checks and the occasional text in the months before where he mentioned starting fresh. He was restless, they say. He had history of sneaking away.
I don't buy it. No, Johnny didn't plan things like that. He hated being organized enough to, make a clean exit. He always left little trails: receipts, half-eaten sandwiches, notes on napkins. This doesn't fit him.
Theory 2, an accident. Maybe he slipped, or something happened near the river, or he was struck and rendered unable to call for help. This theory points to the night, the late hour, the cold pavement, the proximity to water. There's no definitive evidence, but accidents do happen, and people vanish in that way sometimes.
That's the one that keeps me up. The thought that he could be out there and we just didn't find him. That emptiness is different from the idea that he chose to go. It's crueler in a way.
Theory 3, foul play. People whisper that maybe Johnny got mixed up with the wrong person that night, or that something from his past came back to catch up with him. The police didn't find signs of an assault, but absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence. This theory terrifies his mother. It terrifies me.
People who knew him slightly, they'd say, he had friends I wouldn't trust. And you're like, we all do. I hated that phrase, you should be careful whom you trust. It suggests there's a single moment where the wrong person appears and click, everything ends. The truth is messier.
Theory 4, the one people are embarrassed to say, mental health crisis. Maybe Johnny was spiraling in a way no one saw, and the call was him asking for containment rather than intervention. His "don't call the police" line can be read that way. It's complicated because that reading risks reducing Johnny to a diagnosis rather than a person. But it is also, in some ways, the most human of explanations.
I don't like that one either, but it's plausible. He could be tough in front of us and falling apart in private. He was always both. That duality is what makes it hard.
When the theories multiply, what people actually cling to are small, concrete details. A cigarette butt found near a bench, a receipt, the smear of paint on a bench. Those things become talismans. We stamp them with meaning.
Rituals.
Exactly. People start small rituals. A sister lights a candle every birthday. A friend goes to the laundromat on the same night he was last seen and leaves a fresh sketchbook. For some, ritual is a way of refusing the blankness. For others, it's a way to blame themselves less.
You know, I left a postcard on his favorite bench for a year. It said, "Come home," in messy marker. I thought if he saw it, he'd know we were still here. Stupid, right?
Not stupid, human. The need to hold space for someone who might never come back is both tender and terrible. I want to bring in one person who knew a side of Johnny that even Eli didn't fully see. A woman named Rosa, who worked with him at the theater he left. She gave me one short, surprising story that reframes something about him.
Rosa?
Yes. She told me about the night Johnny stayed after rehearsal to help a young actor, a kid who'd been vomiting from nerves. Johnny sat with him, fed him crackers, and then carried his jacket home because the kid's hands shook too much to hold both. Rosa said Johnny did that kind of thing quietly. He could be dramatic, sure, but often he was quietly kind.
That sounds like him. He liked being useful in small ways. It made him feel tethered, I guess.
Rosa's memory complicates the "he left on purpose" theory. It suggests a man who was deeply attached, in small, practical ways, to the people around him. It doesn't rule anything out, but it makes the clean narratives harder to hold. Eli, if we take a step back, if you had one question you could ask Johnny now, 1 hour with him, no consequences, what would you ask?
I'd ask, why did you say, "Don't call the police"? I want him to explain that line. I want him to tell me he was okay, or to tell me he needed me to come for him. But mostly, I'd ask him to tell me what he wanted, so I'd know how to be better.
That question, why did you say "don't call the police," ties to a lot of the ambivalence in this story. It sounds small, but it's huge. Was he protecting someone? Was he protecting himself? Was he afraid of the consequences of telling the truth?
Or he could have been just panicked and said the wrong thing. People do that. They say things that don't mean what they sound like.
Let's sit with a different prompt for a moment. I asked a few people to finish this sentence. The thing I wish I knew about Johnny is. Their answers were not neat. They were mostly fragments. One person said, "I wish I knew if he was truly happy." Another said, "I wish I'd told him it was okay to ask for help." Someone else said simply, "I wish I knew what he ate that night." The details matter because they're ways of trying to touch a life that no longer has a clear timeline.
I wish I knew whether he was in pain. That's the one that keeps me up. If he was in pain, then I want to be angry at myself that I didn't see it. If he wasn't, then I'm angry for different reasons.
People have found ways to live with not knowing. Some build routines, birthdays with empty chairs, anniversaries where they bring stories rather than gifts. Others avoid the places he used to go. Still others become investigators in their own lives, collecting every scrap of lead until they have something that feels like truth.
The community around that laundromat gets thinner. People who used to come to the vigil stop showing up, while others kept coming to remind themselves they weren't forgetting. It's the slow fade that's hardest.
You have this repeated line. That feels true. When someone's gone and there's no answer, the community either stitches a memory into regular life, or the memory becomes an ache you perform on anniversaries. Both are ways of not letting the person vanish completely. I want to introduce a small, quieter voice. Someone on the margins who deepened my sense of who Johnny was. A former high school art teacher, Mr. Klein, sent me a short email describing Johnny as a boy who loved to make other people's days better by changing the colors. He wrote that Johnny once painted a mural of a hummingbird on a school's wall at midnight because a kid said birds helped him sleep. The teacher said Johnny didn't want credit. He just wanted the small fix.
He did that stuff. He'd show up with paint at weird hours. He was always trying to fix the world in tiny ways. That explains why some of us struggle with the idea that he might have left deliberately. That Johnny would intentionally abandon those small repairs is hard to imagine.
Those small acts of kindness, the mural, the jacket carried home, complicate easy answers. They make the space between the theories feel heavier because Johnny's life was a stitched fabric of contradictions, generous and private, outspoken and withdrawn, joyful and brittle.
You hear that, Mara? Brittle. That's perfect.
We haven't solved anything. This entire episode is a study in the human need for closure and the ways closure can fail us. But there are things that have changed. Some friendships splintered. Some people learned to ask for help sooner. A sister moved cities. Johnny's absence rippled outward. People altered their lives around a hole.
My life got quieter in the wrong ways. I check the news differently. I notice cars that pull up where they shouldn't. I remind my sister to text when she's late. I thought I was a person who paid attention. Turns out I was selective.
Selective attention. That's a phrase we've used on this show before. We want to be careful with it because it sounds like judgment. But it is true. In the messy middle of living, we can't watch everything. We choose what to notice, often based on what we're comfortable holding. Before we close, I asked Eli to read one last thing. It's a short passage from a notebook he found, not Johnny's, but one Johnny left in a stack of books at a cafe they both liked. Eli, do you have that?
Yeah. It says, 1. Make a map of small things that make mornings easier. 2. Don't say sorry for space. 3. Carry a pen. 4. Kiss the cat. 5. Remember that small kindnesses add up. I think he wrote that for himself.
Hearing that list now, with everything that followed, is both tender and heartbreaking. It suggests a person who was trying to stay afloat with tiny rules.
Yeah. Carry a pen. It's such Johnny. Practical.
We're going to close with what this episode is asking you to hold. The idea that some stories do not resolve. That is difficult. It feels like a failure of imagination or justice. But it is also a truth about many human lives. We organize narratives because we need sense-making, And sometimes life refuses tidy arcs. If you knew Johnny, you have a question you ask yourself at 3 in the morning. If you never knew him, maybe his story asks you to notice the small people in your neighborhood, the ones who fix things quietly, who carry other people's jackets, who say things like, "Don't call the police," and mean something complicated by it. We are not offering answers today. We are asking for attention.
If you have any memory of Johnny, if you saw him that night, if you remember his jacket, if you ever got a postcard on a bench, please, please tell us. Even small things matter. I know that sounds cliché, but it's true.
We will include a way to contact the show in the episode notes. We are building a small archive of stories, not to sensationalize, but to hold a life steady in the memory of others. One last thing. I asked the people close to Johnny to finish one sentence for us. I asked, if you could tell Johnny one thing now, what would it be? The answers were short.
Come back.
I'm sorry.
I still have your sketchbooks.
You were loved.
Talk to me.
They are all requests and confessions and tiny human commands. They are the kinds of sentences that live in the space between people when answers don't arrive. We started this episode with a voicemail and ended with a list of small commands. They belong together because they both ask for a response that never came. What we do with that absence matters. We can fill it with stories, with rituals, with searching. We can also learn to be more present with the people around us, to call when they sound strange, to show up when they ask, to listen before we explain. This is still Unanswered. I'm Mara Ellison. Eli, thank you for coming on, for being honest, for carrying the weight.
Thanks for having me. And for not turning it into something else.
If you have a still unanswered story about a person, a night, a question that lives in your family, write to us. We want to learn how people live with those questions, not to solve them from the outside, but to understand how they change us. Speak slow. Be kind. We'll keep searching for small details, for kerchiefs and receipts, and half-remembered streetlight conversations. We'll keep asking questions that might never be answered. We do that because not all endings are conclusive, and sometimes the work is simply to sit with the silence. We're still here, and some questions stay. This is Still Unanswered.